everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the virtual book launch for my book, Equine-Assisted Counseling and Psychotherapy, Healing Through Horses. My name is Dr. Hallie Sheade, and I am a licensed professional counselor as well as a registered play therapist. I also have experience with horses and equines for more than 30 years. I am a PATH International Certified Equine Specialist in Mental Health and Learning, as well as a certified therapeutic riding instructor. And this is Laura, who's also joining us today. So Laura, if you want to tell a little bit about your credentials, and then we can share a little bit about how we got into horses and got into doing this work.
That sounds great, Hallie. Thank you very much for having me here with you today. I really appreciate it. I am a PATH certified instructor, and I also have my equine specialist certification through PATH. I'm also CHA certified instructor and clinic staff, and I have been working with horses for over 30 plus years in the industry, working with therapeutic riding, but also eventing, dressage, western, pleasure, gymkhana games, stuff like that. Have equine management skills in working with horses. And this is Bob. He wants to get a good Photoshop in with us this afternoon. As you see, he's one of our play therapy equines. Well, I'm going to let Hallie take over for a moment.
Well, I think Bob can stay where he would like to, so long as you can at least see some of us.
Yes.
So we can talk a little bit now about how we both got into horses and we both got into this industry. So I started riding horses when, well, I was going to say 5, but actually it would go back a little further than that. When I was 2 years old, my parents brought me to a carnival with my play group, and apparently I was the only kid that would go on the hot walker. All the other kids were scared or go on the pony ride because the pony was attached to a hot walker, which meant your parents couldn't go with you. And so from there, my parents realized, well, maybe there's something here between Hallie and horses. So when we moved to a new town when I was 5, they put me in riding lessons, having absolutely no idea what that was going to turn into. Long days at the barn, long weekends at the barn, shuttling me back and forth. Once they turned me onto horses, they couldn't turn it off. So probably, looking back, if I had to speak for my parents, they would say it was probably one of the best decisions and the worst decisions they've ever made. But that time with the horses and spending all that time with the barn, I really got to connect with them, not just for riding, but on the ground as well. And I'd usually have a favorite or two that I was more focused on. So there's one horse in particular named Cowman, and he was the horse that really started all of this for me. I just felt a really strong bond and a really strong connection with him, and it made me really curious to understand the human-animal relationship. So when I went to college, I went to the University of Miami. I started off as a psychobiology major to blend the psychology with the biology, later split it up into 2 separate majors, but all of that was to study animal behavior. Then after I graduated, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do with animal behavior. I thought at first I was actually going to go study primates and get a PhD to work with chimpanzees. Changed my mind, took the year, came back to horses, and started teaching therapeutic horseback riding. Then I learned about this field called, it goes by many different names, but equine-assisted counseling, equine-facilitated psychotherapy, and decided that that was where my true passion lied. So from there, I continued on. I got a master's degree in counseling at Georgia State University. At the same time, I was lucky enough to find an internship site just an hour outside of the city of Atlanta, but I decided I wasn't quite done yet. So I still wanted to learn more. I wanted to do research. So I ended up at the University of North Texas to study under Dr. Cynthia Chandler, who is a worldwide expert in animal-assisted therapy. And everything just took off from there. I started my private practice, Equine Connection Counseling, completed my dissertation on working with military veterans with post-traumatic stress, and have now completed this book. So I'll let Laura talk a little bit about her journey and how she got here.
So my family had horses growing up, so I've always been around the horses. We lived in Virginia, and my dad was in the military, so when we were traveling, we also had access to be able to ride and compete and be around the horses. And when we retired, he purchased a farm in North Georgia with 100 acres where we had a facility down there. I later went, and I've always had a passionate love for horses and being around the horses, and they helped me through some really difficult challenges in my life. When I lost my mother and during some other critical moments in my life and decisions that I was making, the horses have always been in my life. I have hanging at my barn up in Aubrey, where my friend Deb Cook has a facility, is a picture from when I was in kindergarten that says, "When I grow up, I want to be a stable person." It's a picture of me mucking stalls. And my sisters awarded it to me upon the dispersal of my family estate, and it now hangs in the tack room in a very proud place to show that I have grown up to be a stable person. And I get a real kick out of it now that I'm working with counselors in that process and still have my equines and being able to facilitate for the counselors and the interns that Hallie brings on. I'm able to go out in the pasture and help process in the horse behavior and how the horses are reacting to what the clients are dealing with. And I really have enjoyed this process. It's kind of interesting how I ended up in the therapeutic riding from the background that I grew up, where I was really focused on eventing and dressage. When I moved to the Midwest and ended up in out there meeting my husband and my kids, I still worked with horses and taught off and on, but then we ended up moving to Ohio, and there was a point where my husband asked me to go get a job. And I tried several different things. And this goes to big shout out to CHA and Tammy Gaynor and Pegasus Farm, where they kind of took me under their wing, and that's where I came back into the fold of really finding that I had a passion for working with therapeutic riding in individuals with special needs. And in that process, that's where we started when Path originally started the equine-assisted therapy with mental health. I went through one of the first pilot programs out at that facility, and I found that CHA and PATH work really well together, that they help balance each other out. And then upon moving to Texas, I met Hallie about 10 years ago, and it has been we've been working together now about a year.
Yeah.
About a year now. Just our paths crossed back over, and she needed an equine specialist, and I've worked with several other counselors, but I really enjoy the program that Hallie has set up and really respect the process that she has taken and the relationship with the horses and how the horses are treated in her program, that they're not a tool. They are an instrument working with the clients, that they are sentinel beings, and they are a part of the process for healing in our clients.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're just as important as we are in the
Yeah.
session. You know, their feedback, the way they relate to the client, the way they interact with the client. It's not about an activity, or it's not about getting the horse to do something, or creating a specific type of metaphor. The metaphors, I like to call them parallels, because I feel like they parallel what's happening with the client in the client's life outside of here. They come up naturally. And so, you know, for example, you may have a client who comes into the pasture who, and this happens so many times, but we have clients come in and the horse that they expect that they're going to connect with turns out to not be the horse they expected to connect with. It may be somebody else that they never would have considered. And the horse that they originally had hoped to connect with, especially with some of our teenage clients, this can happen, they realize isn't giving them what they want in that relationship. And so that's a really nice parallel then between, I'm not getting what I want in this relationship with this particular horse, who maybe I chose because she looked like Barbie's horse. But here's this other horse who now I'm able to see the difference and understand that what I am getting here meets what I need. And that can have tremendous parallels to those peer relationships of, you know, are the friends that I've chosen really the friends that are supporting me What about this other person who's showing interest in me but isn't somebody I would have considered? So, by allowing the horses to interact organically and naturally with us, that allows those moments to happen and those things to come up. And it's really being patient and trusting the process, which is so much harder sometimes than it is to say out loud. So, yeah. Well, we thought after we introduced ourselves, we would actually just start kind of talking like this about some of the different aspects of the book. So, if we think about the very beginning of the book, one of the first topics is the human-horse relationship. And so I thought we could just chat about that a little bit. And if people have questions or comments, you can write them in and we'll try to answer them as we talk. So I'll give it back to Laura and just kind of get your thoughts in general on the human-horse or donkey, because we also work with donkeys, the human-equine relationship and why that's so powerful.
I think that the relationship that we have with our horses, and that the horses we use, whether it be in a lesson program or in a counseling program, reflect what's going on inside of us. So if I don't watch what's going on within inside of me when I walk into the pasture, that could potentially affect the way the clients interact with the horses in the pasture and how the horse is. So I have to check in with myself each time I walk into the pasture to make sure that I'm in the right place, that the horses can then come in and interact and meet the client in the way the client needs to be met. And I'm there to help the counselor facilitate what the client is needing that day and help to direct them in the direction that I see the horse leading. So I may see the horse move away or move towards the client in a particular way, and I try to help. I am there to assist the counselor in processing through what the horse is saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as the counselor, it's really awesome to be able to work with so many of our companion animals that we already have, that as humans we already have relationships with, but with horses in particular, and I'm obviously biased towards horses and donkeys and and equines, but I think just their sensitivity and their intuitiveness as a prey animal really goes a long way to the capacity of which they're able to give in the counseling sessions. For those of you that are counselors, you know that there's the three main core conditions that we look for in building the relationship, and horses embody all three of those. So in terms of empathy, they're naturally empathic. They're able to feel what we're feeling. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to feel it themselves, so if we're sad that the horse is going to become sad, but they can recognize it in us. And so that ability to understand somebody else, that empathy, that just comes so naturally to them. As well as that being authentic and genuine. They can't lie. They don't have an agenda for us. They don't have an agenda for our clients. And I think for a lot of people that really helps to make the playing field feel more even. That even though, I know I'm coming to counseling for a reason, obviously the goal is change or somebody wouldn't be coming, the horse doesn't have an agenda for me. And the horse can't lie to me. And so I can trust the horse even if I can't trust other people. And then the unconditional positive regard and the acceptance. A horse may not always accept our behaviors. So if I were to get up and run around and start screaming, these guys who you can't see because they went to the other side of the round pen right now, they would have a reaction, maybe not quite as big as some of our others because they're our play therapy minis. So they've seen a lot, they've heard a lot, banging of drums, throwing of balls. But at the end of the day, even if they don't accept our behavior, they accept us as an individual. And so they don't judge us, on what we wore, what we did yesterday, what we did a year ago. All they care about is how they feel with us in that moment. And so for so many people, that can be really freeing in that, I don't have to be a certain way. I don't have to think a certain way for this horse to accept me. I just have to, communicate to the horse that I'm not a threat. So, yeah. So another thing that kind of, comes up when I think about the horse-human relationship, and especially in our field, is just all the changes that we've seen in our field. And you and I have both been involved in the equine-assisted activities and therapies industry for a while. I got involved when I started with therapeutic riding as an instructor in training in 2007 as a volunteer long before that, and I know you've been involved for probably longer than that.
I became certified in 2006, but I had been working with individuals with special needs for a very long time. Even growing up in North Georgia, we had clients that had either had strokes or traumatic brain injuries, ADHD before people were getting diagnosed with that left and right, dyslexia. And the benefit of working with horses and building that relationship with the horse to help the client process through or to be able to better their lives has just been amazing. And just seeing the industry grow from when it was NARA now to being PATH International, and CHA even having their IRD, which is Riders with Disabilities certification process too, and how it's grown has just been an amazing transformation in the industry, the quality of instructors that are out there, and the need to have good quality ESs, equine specialists, is so vital out there. Those individuals that really understand the herd, understand horse behavior, and are willing to step in with the right mentality, with knowing themselves well enough to be able to interact and help the counselors in this process is so vitally important to having good counselors out there. And it opens up some really unique changes and challenges in life to have the horses involved. One of the biggest assets I see when you're doing the equine-assisted therapy versus just sitting in an office personally is that I think this would have been really great for me during some times that I needed some counseling. Because if we all really admit it, we all need counseling to some effect. And I highly recommend equine-assisted therapy and counseling.
Yeah. And it's been cool to see the way the industry's changed, just, even in the last 5 years, and, PATH expanding and really trying to broaden from just therapeutic riding into the mental health and learning fields, and just seeing the way the equine specialist certification has grown as well. And I've just seen such an explosion of interest in the mental health side of things, the equine-assisted counseling, equine-facilitated psychotherapy. We'll come back to talking about terminology in a second, but just the interest just grows. I mean, I get emails from people wanting services, from people wanting to figure out how to get competent into providing the services, get training almost weekly. And so the interest just continues to grow exponentially in this field, and I think it is because, like what you said, there's so many people who need the help and need the support, but either they haven't felt comfortable in an office or it hasn't produced the results that they were hoping for. We have some clients that we may collaborate with other aspects of their treatment team to provide a segment of an overall care plan. And so there's just so many different ways that this type of therapy can be integrated into somebody's treatment plan, or standalone counseling, or whatever that may be.
And when you have a counselor that understands equine behavior in the horse, and you add that into your therapeutic riding program, and you have a situation that may arise with your therapeutic riding program with a client, and RTR instructors, they don't know how to handle the mental aspect of it, or it's outside their range if their client starts talking about whether it be cutting or whether it be suicide and those types of tendencies. Having that counselor there to help support the rest of the team is vitally important, I believe. And I really, really think it's definitely an asset for every therapy center to have a good counseling program, or a counselor that definitely understands the equine behavior in order to assist with the therapeutic riding instructors and being able to support the therapeutic riding instructors.
Yeah, because we know some facilities aren't able to offer a counseling program, but just the value that you see in at least having a consulting mental health professional involved in a non-counseling program to be able to help the instructors like you and your staff to be able to really meet those clients' needs and to provide the most effective service for them. to understand them.
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
So, so I know we said we'd come back and talk a little bit about terminology, because I joke when I say this, but I'm quite a bit serious. I hate the term equine therapy, because you never know what you're talking about. You don't know if you're talking about a therapy service that's provided by a licensed medical professional or a licensed healthcare professional, where the goal is not horsemanship and riding, but the goal is to address specific treatment goals. You don't, or on the flip side, you could be talking about therapeutic riding, like what Laura does, where the focus is on horsemanship and riding, and the professionals offering the service are generally certified or highly trained riding instructors, but not, in a role to be meeting specific clinical treatment goals. But then there's the third one that doesn't get brought up so much, which is it could be therapy for horses. And so coincidentally enough, we have a place across the street that provides equine therapy for horses. And I actually had a client show up there once convinced they were in the right place because the sign said equine therapy. And so, that's why I joke that I actually hate that term. So PATH is in the process of revamping their terminology. They have a task force established to help provide some clarity around the field and the terminology. So as they're working through that, I've historically used the current definitions. And one of the things I really like about the way PATH defines the field is they separate it into equine-assisted activities and equine-assisted therapies. And so there's a very clear delineation, and it's based on who's providing the service and what the goal is. So an equine-assisted activity would be like, in most cases, and of course there's exceptions to the rule depending on how it's being facilitated, but for the most part, something like therapeutic horseback riding, like what Laura was talking about, that would fall in the activities category, because it's facilitated by qualified riding instructors. Most of the time, ideally, they're certified by some independent body. Obviously, we're partial to PATH and CHA, but the goal is primarily horsemanship and riding to provide a positive recreational experience for people with disabilities and challenges, with instructors who understand disabilities, who understand the special needs, and are able to make adaptations and accommodations. That being said, there are tremendous secondary benefits to participating in that beyond riding and horsemanship alone. So maybe you could speak to some of the benefits you've seen in therapeutic riding.
In the therapeutic riding?
Yeah, some of those secondary benefits.
Some of the secondary benefits with the therapeutic riding is building confidence and self-esteem when they accomplish goals in therapeutic riding. The enjoyment of building the relationship with the horse as they're learning to ride the horse and horsemanship skills. I look at therapeutic riding that also encompasses groundwork and building the relationship and your skills from the ground up. That's a lot of the programs that I see really want their riders to understand how to prepare the horse, get the horse ready for classes. So they're working on small motor skills, large motor skills, coordination, balance, anywhere from on the ground to climbing on the horse and riding the horse. Carriage driving is another aspect of therapeutic riding that's in there, is the driving when you have clients that can no longer ride horses or have an ability that does not allow them to be able to ride, whether it be from weight or they're in a chair and they're not able to be on the horse. Therapeutic riding has taught me so much in my teaching ability and how to teach, because you're breaking down the skills to a more minute what's the word I'm looking for?
You're breaking it down, making it like as simple
as possible.
Yeah.
And how to turn the horse and make it where everybody can understand exactly what you're wanting. You're taking a skill that a lot of us as accomplished riders take for granted, and you're having to go, well, how exactly do I turn the horse? And breaking it down to the seat, the leg, the foot, the hand, where are my shoulders? And then when you take that and you've broken it down to that minuteness to your therapeutic riding instructors, to your therapeutic students, and then you go back and you climb on your horse and you go, oh, well, this is what I'm doing, and I need to do this. And then you find that you accomplish your goals with your own horses and your ability to maneuver the horse in a better way when you break it all the way down. I find being a therapeutic riding instructor is so rewarding in so many ways and fills your heart in some of the coolest aspects of ways. Just the accomplishment that you see on your riders and things that you may take for granted on a daily basis, and then you watch your clients accomplish those things. It kind of warms the heart and makes you feel excited about what you do and what we do as therapeutic riding instructors. It's not an easy job. It's not out there. Teaching therapeutic riding is not easy. It takes a lot. It takes a lot of skill from the instructor to be able to really accomplish what they want and build independence in each one of their clients. And so I find it as a very enjoyable thing. And then I find that doing the ES work just encourages me and helps me even more as a therapeutic riding instructor.
Yeah. And as you were talking, I think the word empowering came to mind for therapeutic riding in particular, because it takes these individuals with disabilities and special needs and not only allows them to develop a new skill set, but find new parts of themselves through learning this. So that's the equine-assisted activity side of the thing. And then, there's one, so you mentioned the riding and the carriage driving. There's one more that generally falls into the activity side, and that's the vaulting, which is kind of like a combination of gymnastics and dance on the back of a horse. And so, but again, the focus being these are more skill-based with the secondary benefits. But, on the flip side of it, then you've got the equine-assisted therapy side. And so I like to say that that's kind of the reverse, where generally speaking, at least in our approach, we're not focused on teaching the client horsemanship skills or riding or any of that thing. We're focused on specific clinical treatment goals. Now, the funny thing is, and I don't know if you've seen this with any of the clients that you've worked with over the years, but is that so many of my clients, even though I'm not teaching them concrete horsemanship skills, they come out as such solid horse people. So I have clients that I had an adolescent girl years ago who worked with this one horse, and this particular horse had a reputation around the barn. She was high energy, she was very smart, which can be really great for horses, but can also make them very challenging to work with. When she didn't want to do something, she knew exactly what to do to make everybody back off and be like, you know what, I'm just going to leave you alone. So she had this adolescent girl that worked with her week after week, and this adolescent girl learned to handle this horse better than most of the staff and all of the volunteers. So this horse would do her thing. She'd decide, I don't want to go there. I'm going to pretend to spook, because that was her thing. And the little girl would stop, look at her and be like, you're fine, let's go. And on they would go. Whereas her reaction to most of the people, volunteers especially, but even a lot of the staff, was, okay, I'm going to leave this horse alone. And so I've seen that with so many clients, clients that have been able to lead a horse, or in some cases a donkey, that other people haven't been able to do, even staff. And so I think with the counseling, even though horsemanship isn't the goal for why they're coming, they get that along the way. And so that kind of, what is the goal? So there's two different types of services, at least how I just define it in my mind and using past definitions, that fall in the therapy category. And so that is the equine-assisted counseling, which I call equine-assisted counseling and psychotherapy. PATH refers to it as equine-facilitated psychotherapy. They're the same thing. I just, in discussions with my major professor, Dr. Chandler, years ago, we had some philosophical discussions about terminology, and we both just felt for at least, the way we felt, we preferred the term assisted to facilitated, but there's nothing wrong with either one. But that being one of them, and that's the one that obviously we've been talking about. The other one, and I would say maybe not quite 9 times out of 10, but 8 times out of 10, I hear this one misused, is hippotherapy. So I hear hippotherapy used to describe therapeutic riding, to describe the counseling, but the technical definition for hippotherapy is, the technical abbreviated definition is physical, occupational, or speech therapy on the back of a horse. And that is a service that has to be also facilitated by somebody with a license in one of those fields. So again, it's not about learning the horsemanship or learning the riding, but it's about using the horse's movement in order to accomplish those specific clinical goals in those fields, whether it be physical, occupational, or speech and language pathology. So, did you have anything you wanted to add on terminology?
No, and the biggest thing when you think about therapeutic riding and the difference between hippotherapy and therapeutic riding is, as a therapeutic riding instructor, you're teaching horsemanship skills. You're not teaching physical therapy, you're not teaching occupational therapy, you're not a physical therapist, occupational therapist. You are a therapeutic riding instructor, and you're teaching horsemanship skills and horsemanship goals. And that's probably the biggest definition that needs to be out there. The difference between those and the counseling and stuff like that is that a therapeutic riding instructor is not a therapist.
Right. They're not trained to meet the clinical goals that somebody with a licensed healthcare license would be trained to do. And likewise, a lot of people with those healthcare licenses aren't trained to integrate the horse part, at least without somebody assisting them, which is why we include an equine specialist in working with a lot of our counselors, because a lot of our counselors don't have the horse experience to be able to keep themselves and the client safe by themselves. But not only that, to understand the horse enough to really be able to utilize the horse's feedback and the horse's responses, or the donkey's, in the session effectively. And so, if you have a counselor, now we're kind of getting into competencies a little bit, but if you have a counselor who doesn't know horses and isn't working with an equine specialist, they may be misreading or misinterpreting the horse's cues, missing signs of stress in the horse, and just, generally the session would not be able to flow as easily. And at least it's my opinion that if a horse feels understood often enough in a counseling session, they're going to choose, or at least attempt to choose and communicate that they don't want to be there anymore. So as we're kind of veering this direction, maybe let's talk a little bit about competencies and what you think, and I'll talk a little about the counselor side. Laura can talk about the equine specialist side, but what you think an equine specialist needs to know and be able to do.
I really think, one, the equine specialist needs to be empathetic for the client, too, along with being empathetic with horses and understanding horse behavior. Watching the herd, watching horses move around naturally in the pasture, you need to spend a lot of time understanding how they communicate to each other, and then how they communicate with their humans that are around them. I think compassion for both your equine and for your people, your clients, your humans that you're working with, is we've got to be compassionate. We have to be open to seeing the different interpretations that can come out through the counselor. Just because the equine specialist thinks, oh no, that horse was saying this, that it was clearly saying this, you need to be able to be open enough to know that there may be another direction that that client needs to go, and that it can be interpreted in another way. And then it may ultimately come back around to what you originally saw. But the counselor may need to go down a different avenue to get the client to come back to where this other issue is. So you have to be open as an equine specialist to the counselor's interpretation of what's going on, being very aware and working clearly with your counselor, having a good relationship with the counselor, and it's not a competition. It's very important for the equine specialist to not compete with the counselor. The counselor is the licensed professional that knows what the client needs. You're the one there as the equine specialist to help keep the client and the counselor safe, and to help interpret when the interpretation is not quite clear, and you may need to help the counselor make sure things are more clear, but not to step on each other's toes in the process. I try and step back and let my counselors make their decisions in what direction they want to take their client. So really spending time understanding the horse. And that means not going to one clinic or one conference on how to read a horse or interpret a horse. It takes a long time to really understand and interpret the horse behavior and the different way different herds interact. You may have to separate your herds. So you need to know when your horses aren't interacting well together, and you need to be able to go, okay, we need to separate the herd today, and we need to move this herd over here and bring this herd over here so that we have a better cohesive session with our clients and with our horses. Really being able to understand when a horse is under stress and knowing the signs of stress in a horse is so vitally important, because if you continue to keep doing sessions and allow that horse to fall under stress, you're going to end up with the horse getting colicking, with the horse getting a bad attitude. They act out if they're being used in both counseling sessions and therapeutic. If they've had a bad counseling session and you throw them into a therapeutic session right afterwards, not always a good thing. You know, it may not turn out the way you want it to turn out. Your therapeutic riding instructor may come to you and go, what happened during session? My horse took off in the middle of class, and this is the slow poke lazy horse. So you have to really be able to read your horses during your sessions to know, okay, we had a rough session today. I need to let my therapeutic riding instructor know they're going to need to change. They're going to need to choose a different horse for class today because the session was tough. They think, oh, well, you're just standing out there talking to the horses. How can that be more stressful than going off and jumping a Grand Prix jumping course? You know, it is. It can be very stressful for the horse to be in counseling sessions.
Yeah. That emotional toll
on
them. And that's where having an equine specialist that can recognize those cues, and in some cases if the counselor has that level of horse experience, they'll be able to recognize it too. Or, you know, I know there are some places where the counselor plays both roles if they're dually qualified, which, you know, that can be a tall order. But, you know, being able to recognize the difference between a horse that is relaxed and satisfied and a horse that's shut down.
Yeah.
Because some of those horses that seem very calm and very stoic are actually, they're very shut down and they're very stressed. And so knowing the horses and being able to recognize those subtle cues, I think the equine specialists like you that I've most appreciated is they can see what's going to happen before it does. And usually they can step in to stop it. So, you know, you may have, you know, I've had clients where the herd has come to support the client in a moment where the client's been more vulnerable, and it's telling the difference between, okay, I'm reading the equine specialist is reading the herd, they're seeing that everybody's okay, and then there's, you know, a muscle tense or an ear twitch, and it's like, oh, this is all about to change. And so somebody who has that level of horse experience, which, you know, generally takes years to develop.
And with that, and, you know, you see the herd come in, and you've got, you know, several horses gathering in. They're supporting the client. They may have pushed the equine specialist and the counselor just to outside the circle. You're allowing the client to be in the center of the circle. You're watching each one of the horse's behavior and movements, but in that process, you need to be able to direct the client how to move out of the herd if something starts to go awry.
Yeah.
You need to be able to step in and move the horses and bring the client into a safe position so that the client is safe, still allowing the sanctity of the session to happen. You can't just be, okay, the client's surrounded, what do I do? It's, okay, how are the horses behaving? Have they come in to support the client? Is there something the client needs to process through? You know, and allowing the counselor to be able to take the lead on, how do you feel? Where are you going with this?
Right.
You know, how does this make you feel? And me being able to stand there and go, the horses are fine. They're here to support you. You're okay. Okay, now it's time to step out. I need you to move forward towards me, or I need you to step back away, or step into this horse and stand closer to this horse. So knowing your herd, knowing what the pecking order is in your herd is so vitally important during a counseling session.
Yeah, definitely. And so switching over to the counselor side of things, and counselor or therapist, because there are other types of mental health professionals that play that therapist role, not just counselors, social workers, psychologists, marriage and family therapists, chemical dependency counselors that are working with chemical dependency population, psychiatrists, and depending on what country you're in, that could be different as well. So for the counselors or the therapists, obviously first and foremost, they need to have a license in a mental health field where they are recognized by the state or territory or country as being somebody who's qualified to provide mental health treatment. Now, obviously, in some cases, we bring in graduate interns, and so our graduate interns practice under the supervision of a licensed mental health professional. And at our agency, I'm a licensed professional counselor supervisor, and so I have graduate counseling interns who come in and see clients as well who are under my supervision. So that doesn't mean I'm out there in every session with them, but it means that I am responsible for their clients as well, and that we talk about their cases in ways that they can better support, better understand their clients. And so obviously, first and foremost, having that mental health training, which 9 times out of 10 is going to require a graduate degree. There are certain types, I believe in certain states, especially for chemical dependency and substance use, you may be able to do that without a graduate degree. But for the most part, you're going to be looking at a graduate degree. And then from there, some of the skill sets that I think are really beneficial. Well, I'm going to back up. So the mental health degree, but then you also need to have competency in animal-assisted therapy, specifically equine if you're going to be working with horses. Because generally to have competency as a mental health professional, you need to have had training or education and supervised experience. Those are the 2 big things. So, at the graduate students that come to me from the University of Texas, the majority of them have taken a semester-long animal-assisted therapy course. Other people may go to a workshop in a specific training modality. There's so many different ones out there that you can go to now. But the other piece that I think, and I see get missed a lot, is people go and get the training, but they don't get the supervision. And so for those of you that aren't familiar with that term, if you're not in the mental health field, it means that you have somebody, or if you're fully licensed, then depending again on your field and your state, it may be referred to as consultation or peer supervision, where you have somebody who's been in the field and doing what you want to be doing, who's available either to supervise your work or available to consult with you on a regular basis as you're getting started. Because that helps to make sure that you're providing the service in a way that's ethical and effective, and that somebody who has experience can guide you or mentor you in learning these skills, and then not only learning them, but implementing them appropriately. And so those are the 2 big ones, obviously the mental health training and then the animal-assisted therapy training. And then from there, some of the experiences and the coursework that I recommend that I find incredibly helpful and handy in this field is training in group work, which most mental health training programs are going to have, because when it's not just you and a client in an office, when you've got an equine specialist or you've got 5 or maybe 10 equine co-facilitators, there are group dynamics that come up that you need to understand and know how to process and address. Even if the client is the only one who's technically there for therapy, there's still the group dynamics. I think play therapy and expressive arts therapy training is tremendously helpful in being able to get out of just the talking and to understand it from that expressive standpoint of the way the client is relating to the horse, not just the way they're talking about the horse, the way the client is feeling and the things that come up beyond the talking. Those are some really, really great experiences to have. And then, like I said, finding a supervisor, which can be really tough because the field is growing, but the field is still not huge. And so being able to find somebody, especially local in your area, who's already doing it, who you can do supervision or consultation with. And then for the counselors, I know that there's different philosophies on this, whether or not the counselor should or shouldn't have horse experience. I know there's some camps that believe it's better for the counselor to not have horse experience because then they're not projecting onto the horse. My personal philosophy is I actually like my counselors to have a horse experience. Now that's not to say that a counselor who doesn't have it can't get started, but I want them to start learning as soon as they start seeing clients. Because the more they understand the horses, number one, the more that they'll be able to keep themselves safe, which takes some of the burden off the equine specialist. But the more they'll understand the horse and be able to use that horse's or donkey's feedback more effectively in the session and to understand the feedback being given to them by the equine specialist. And just understanding the horse as a species. They are different than predators like dogs and cats. They see the world very differently. And being able to understand and defer to the equine specialist on issues related to safety or stress even if they themselves aren't really seeing that or understanding that. So for example, a halter twist with the strap twisted behind the ear can cause stress for a horse. It can cause pain for a horse. And so there are some horses that will immediately respond to that, and you'll know right away they're uncomfortable. There are others that are more stoic and may not respond. And so trusting the equine specialist when they say, hey, I've noticed that this is twisted and I'm concerned it could hurt the horse, that they had a reason and an intention for saying that at that moment, as opposed to letting the client come to that on their own. Perhaps they knew this horse is more stoic, and this horse may not show a sign and may end up being in discomfort for the entire session, versus another horse who's going to be rubbing their ear on you, shaking their head, be like, I'm uncomfortable. And it'll be like a big flashing sign that the client will see. So what would you say is one of the things, kind of getting back to the equine specialist counselor role, that's been the most surprising for you, just in working with the counselors or just being an equine specialist?
I think, I'll tell you one of the things that I think has been the best working with Hallie and her team here, and that's very vital to the equine specialist, and that's the debrief after sessions. Is so important. I've known so many equine specialists and seen so many equine specialists that end up not doing well at their job because they don't sit down with the counselors at the end and process through what happened in session. Instead, they try to as equine specialists, we have not been trained how to handle the client's emotions and some of the really ucky stuff that comes up in counseling. And so it's so vitally important for the equine specialist to sit down and debrief with the counselors at the end of the session. I think that's something that's very important. It's not an ego thing, it's not nothing. If you're struggling with something, you come in the morning and you've got sessions all day, and you've had a rough day or a rough couple of days prior, you need to debrief prior to going into session, and then at the end of session you need to debrief, and open up and share what you've got going on so that it doesn't affect the client or the horses when you walk into session. If you carry that stuff on your own and you don't talk to the counselor about it, it's not going to make for an effective counseling session with your clients, and ultimately it will give the horses more stress.
Yeah, and that's such a vital thing for the counselors as well. I mean, to be aware of all that, because especially for counselors that may not know quite as much about horses, you may not be aware the way your stuff is going to come in to the session, and that the horses are going to pick up on it, and they're going to respond to you, and they may be responding to you more so than the client, depending on what's going on with you. And so, whether that is just you playing both roles or you working with an equine specialist, all of these things that we've been talking about for the equine specialist, any counselors who have the qualifications to be able to play both roles, this is just as relevant. For them, it's just they're wearing both hats instead of one. So I know we're getting close to time. Looks like, I don't know if you guys can hear, somebody's having a potty break over there. That's horses. So, one of our approaches to counseling, which are especially the relational equine partnered counseling approach, is interwoven throughout the book. And so that's our main approach that we use. It's called relational equine partnered counseling. And it's based off of what I've loosely termed four philosophical domains. And so this is kind of where this approach comes from, what I think is important, and kind of what my experience in working with clients over these last more than 10 years now doing this have taught me. And so one of them is the relational domain, which we spent a lot of time talking about, where we see the horse or the donkey as a relational being. They're not a tool, they're not an object to be manipulated or moved, but just that they're there to be in relationship with the client. And so sometimes when people hear the word relationship, they think like, oh, this is this warm fuzzy and the client needs to hug the horse, and that's not what relationship means in this context. It means, just like Laura and I are interacting, we're in a relationship. Ashley, who's holding the camera over there, we're in a relationship with her as well. We're in a relationship with our spouses. We're in a relationship, with our mechanic when we drop our cough. These are all ways that we relate to each other. And so we bring the horse or the donkey into the relationship, as well as another being that we are relating to. But in addition to that, from the mental health side of things, one of the biggest predictors of a client's success in any form of mental health treatment is the strength of the relationship between the client and the counselor. If that relationship isn't there, then the progress is going to be limited. And so in our approach, we have actually expanded that relationship to also include the equine specialist, but also include the horses, or donkeys. So most of our clients tend to choose a horse or a donkey that becomes their main animal. And that's not the case for every client. Some of them, the herd becomes the relationship, and each animal in the herd they form a personal relationship with. And so again, that relationship piece and honoring that is so critical. Another component of the RAPC model is the experiential, where the fact that the change happens for the clients by experiencing, by doing, so by being here, by actually feeling the feelings with the horses that they may feel with people. So feeling, that sense of acceptance when a horse approaches them, feeling that sense, of concern or sadness if a horse walks away, and being able to process and understand those feelings in the here and now. And then by being able to try different things with the horses. So for example, a client who may have difficulty being assertive or communicating their needs with people, we're likely to see that come out in some way by the way they interact with the horses too. And for a lot of people, being able to first practice those skills or try something new with a horse or a donkey feels a lot less threatening than trying it with a human. And so that experience of doing that starts to change the way the client thinks about themselves, the way they feel about themselves, but even the pathways in the brain. And so that's the second domain. The third domain is, I call it interspecies neurobiology. So there's been a growing interest in the mental health field about interpersonal neurobiology. And that's how we relate to each other on a neurobiological level and how we can use that in mental health treatment to help our clients. And so we utilize that here as well. And so as I was researching my book, I was learning some really fascinating things. Like, it's theorized that horses can sense how we're feeling based on even pheromones that we may be releasing. They may be able to notice changes in our heart rate, changes in our breathing rate. So all of these physiological cues that we relate to them and they relate to us. And there's been some pretty seminal research that has come out, and this is on dogs. I haven't seen any come out on horses yet, but I believe that it's probably very similar, which is that when a human interacts with a dog, when a human pets a dog, it releases oxytocin in both the human and the dog. And so oxytocin is our feel-good social bonding connection hormone. It also decreases cortisol, which is our stress hormone. And so just being with an animal, just stroking an animal, in this case a dog, but I would be shocked if it wasn't true for horses as well, creates neurobiological benefits for us. So recognizing, and I'm making it very, very abbreviated here, you can read more about it in the book, but just there's this whole wealth of information about neurobiology from the horse side and the human side and how we relate and interact together. And then the fourth domain is the spiritual domain. So for me, that isn't adherence to a specific spiritual or faith or religious practice, but just recognizing that, one, there are things that are going to happen in the session that I like to say we don't have the science to explain it, but it's happening. So when the herd surrounds a client, when a horse starts walking past a client, maybe it's the boss mare, starts making drive-bys past a client, which has happened in multiple herds that I've worked with. I check in with the client. The client's like, yeah, there's something that I don't want to talk about, but apparently this horse has picked up on it. Mm-hmm. And so, is that you, Bob? So, just being able to recognize that these things are happening, even if we don't have the science to explain it, but also honoring the client's process and the client's meaning of what's happening and how that connects to their personal, spiritual, or faith system, but also the experiences that they have. I've had different clients who have felt the horse or heard the horse or the donkey speaking to them. And that's not for me to judge or interpret, but that is an experience, a spiritual experience for a lot of these clients that is personal to them. And so being able to have space to honor that. And then from the way the model looks itself, the RAPC model, again, it's that relational focus of allowing the horses to be free and natural and organic. Most of our sessions happen in the pasture, where the horses can be at liberty and they have the most freedom to respond to the clients, because that's where they get the most genuine feedback, is when the horse chooses to approach or chooses to walk away. Or maybe the horse starts yawning in response to something they're noticing in the client or that they're feeling in, the mini herd that's been created between the equine specialist and the counselor and the horses. And so allowing them that feedback and allowing them to have that voice, and then allowing the client to make the meaning of what's happening in the pasture. So I know we're getting close to the end of our time, but just one of our offshoots of that model is our play therapy model. And so we utilize all the same principles that I've just been describing in the REPC model, except we've integrated that with the child-centered play therapy approach. And here is one of our most talented equine therapists who, he has just played such a crucial role for so many of the kids that come and see him and come and see the other one who's off camera right now. And just being that calm, steady presence in the play therapy area, giving the child someone that they can receive nurturing from, someone they can provide nurturing to, someone who they don't feel like is going to criticize them or judge them or tell them that what they're doing is wrong. And so it just allows a child so much freedom to express themselves and to feel emotionally safe. So I know we are getting close to our time. So kind of some last thoughts that we'll leave you with is just really the power of these guys and their sentience and allowing them to relate to us, allowing them to choose how to interact with the clients. Because I don't know about you, but a lot of the time I think they know better what's going on.
Sometimes they do. There is most definitely the horse knows more than I know, that's for sure.
Yeah. And I've had moments even where the horse is trying to move me away from the client. The horse is trying to reorganize other horses. And usually when I step back and just kind of, step out of, I need to, I'm the therapist, so I need to know what's going on here and just let the horses do what they need to do, that usually results in a pretty powerful session for the client.
And it's a balance of knowing when to micromanage the horse's feet and when not to micromanage the horse's feet, and let them just be a horse and allow them to help interact in the session. Coming from a background of safety, and therapeutic riding where I'm always trying to manage the horse's feet, I find it very important to sometimes just step back and trust that the horses are going to do what they know how to do and they understand what needs to be happening in that session.
Yeah, definitely. And it sounds easy and simple when we say it, but it's hard because it's really about trusting the process. And so to that end, to cover that topic, among many other topics, is why I wrote the book. And so, we also offer trainings. We're getting ready to launch some virtual webinars, some on demand, some live as well. So if you don't follow or like Equine Connection Counseling, that's where a lot of our things will be posted. And then if you are interested in getting the book, it's available directly from the publisher, which is Routledge, but also on Amazon. And so you can search for the book, Equine-Assisted Counseling and Psychotherapy, Healing Through Horses. I also have an author page, so you can search for me as well. So we thank you all for joining us today, and me, Laura, and Bob, and Mama who's off camera. And we hope that everyone has a great rest of their evening.